Hello, and welcome to Creative Banter, a creativity and philosophy-focused podcast where anything goes. I'm your host, Cody Schultz. Joining me is the one and only Ben Horn. This week, we are discussing the realities of being a full-time photographer, as pointed by a recent video from Thomas Heaton. This shifts us toward discussing our approaches to heading into the wilderness, including whether we should take trips without our camera from time to time. We end with 2 topic suggestions as placed by individuals in our Discord group. Let's dive right into it, shall we? So, a couple episodes back, I mentioned about Leica bringing on a new film camera.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out it's not exactly new. They are more so updating the M6.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, let me see if I can pull up that. Should have done this before we start recording, but
We're professionals.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to be. Yeah, it's supposed to be a relaunch of the M6. It'll be due to launch in October.
I wonder why they went with that over the M7.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's going to showcase their classic lights logo, or lights, however you pronounce that. Just like the early originals of the Leica M6 Classic stating that it will not have TTL metering. So, I can't imagine that they wouldn't have metering in a modern film camera, but
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the classic Leica thing where it's like, oh, you want a meter? Well, that's, you just got to carry that along too. It's, I all manual approach to, I could definitely see that. That's interesting.
yeah, but then why wouldn't you just update like the M3? Because the M3 is one of their most popular ones.
Yeah.
So why not just stick with that body, update it, instead of going with updating the M6 that, for the most part, had TTL?
Yeah.
I don't know. At least they're not updating the M5 or relaunching the M5 because everybody hated that one.
See, I'm not familiar enough with those.
The M5 was a massive redesign of the camera. It looks nothing like a Leica. It's very rectangular. It doesn't have like the classic. It's not the classic look. So everybody was very against that, and it almost killed off the entire Leica M line when they did that until they brought on the M6. So, But yeah, it's interesting that they're deciding to relaunch the M6 rather than bring on something entirely novel, which is smart from a business side. I mean, especially with the popularity of it.
Yeah. They're sticking with what works and what they know, and perhaps that's targeted at the new generation of photographers who didn't necessarily have access to, I mean they have to have access to copious amounts of money, but when all that stuff was current and new on the market, everything now is used. And also it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact it has on prices on the used market. Just because it seems like everything on the used market keeps going higher and higher and higher. And at some point, I wonder if the companies are like, well, why don't we just make them new again and see what that, what happens with that and get their piece of the pie from that.
Yeah, I mean, looking on eBay right now, the M6s, and most of them are TTL, are going for about $2,500 to $3,000, right in that range. And there's some outliers that reach up to $4,000. There's a very rare Leica M6 Platinum Anton Bruckner edition body only with a box and some kind of authenticity thing for $8,000.
Yeah. They like doing their special editions.
Yeah.
They really
Yeah.
do.
I am curious, though, what they're going to price it at when it comes out, because, like I said, I guess it's going to come out in October already.
Whatever number is in your head, double it.
Yeah. Yeah. But then it's a matter of, I think they have to be careful with that, though, because if it's just a relaunch of the M6, why not just get an old M6? If you're going to be paying double for something that's brand new, or get a MP or the MA or whatever else is still readily available that's brand new. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what kind of things they pull.
That's why I'm glad I don't have to think about such things. Just, got my cameras and my old lenses, and I'm quite happy with them as they are. So it's nice to be out of that world, I've got to say.
Yeah, I kind of, every so often I find myself like inching toward that little world, and then I'm like, no. You've tried that before. Don't do it again.
Yep, the ship starts steering towards the rocks.
Yep.
And
Sirens start singing.
You know that, nothing good's gonna come from that. It's not a. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you and I both ended up, dabbling back into digital a little bit, and then just jumping back out of it again. I think at least that was one of the reasons why. Where it's just, I don't know. I feel like shooting film with the camera that I have is just kind of like a nice, safe little island, with everything I need, and without the distraction of all the other latest and greatest and everything else that comes along those lines.
I'm still so tempted by some digital, though, every once in a while. Especially like you see Matt Day just posted a video, and Kyle McDougall just posted a video on the Fuji GFX 50R. That I think both of them actually purchased it used. I think they paid maybe like $2,500 for it, something like that, which isn't bad for a medium format digital camera. And then the number of like adaptations that you can use for different lenses, like different, even Leica M mount lenses to adapt them and all of that. It's really interesting. And it has me thinking, but at the same time, I'm like, no, you've tried that before.
Yeah. Yeah. Did not go so well last time.
And that's double what you tried, double the expense of what you tried. So no.
But also when people buy cameras, I think most of the time, or at least it's been my experience, that you have this story in your mind. Like, this is going to change things. It's going to allow me to do stuff. I'm going to have more, I don't know, whatever. Maybe it's like when people are like buying a Jeep. They're like, I'm going to take it off road. I'm going to do this. But it doesn't really change things.
Yeah.
It kind of, it is what it is for the most part. So whenever I get those sort of fantasies in my head about, how it will change things, it never does. It doesn't.
I think my biggest thing with it just is because of my work itself, and just not like, I'll see the work that like Kyle, for instance, posts on during his videos. And I'm like, why can't my work look like that? And so I blame it on working with film, even though his work looks just as good with film. And it's, huge self-deprecational tendencies get you.
It's a huge trap to fall into, for sure.
Yeah. But speaking on YouTube videos, Thomas Heaton just released a new video earlier this week that was talking about his business. It's how I run and operate my photography business. And it was really eye-opening to witness, because a lot of where his money comes from is like obviously his YouTube channel and the ad revenue that he gets there, but he was showing how most of what he does, or pretty much everything that he does, is just by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a solid like 3 or 4 minute clip through the video of his calendars and the fact that he offers his calendars a couple months in advance as pre-orders, but most people aren't going to pre-order a calendar. They'll just wait until it's ready to be shipped to them and then get it the next few days.
Yeah.
So he has to incentivize that, which means that he's signing these calendars. And on top of that, he's also including a print with the calendars when you do a pre-order.
Wow.
So now he is selling thousands of calendars, doing it all by himself. And he also has to make the thousands of prints, signing them, packaging them, doing the labels, all of that, all on his own. He said that
Wow.
to package up all of these calendars, it takes him something like 3 continuous days of doing it at least. And that's only
I would have
because...
thought it'd take even more than that.
Well, that's only because he has like a major system going on.
Yeah.
Like he said that in an hour he can package, I think he said like 200 calendars in an hour.
Oh, wow.
So he is like, he has everything exactly where he needs it and just goes through into a major like state of flow where it's just, he's just not even there. He's just moving. But just to think about that, like the realities of being such a popular photographer and the stress that's on you to when you have such huge orders for that and to make a living off of it, it was just, like I said, very eye-opening just to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, there's so much work involved. I mean, I was just thinking about the logistics of the calendars and then, you know, dropping them off to get mailed out. Just when you scale everything up so significantly, but also, you know, handle everything on your own. That is, yeah. Plus all the pressure that comes with it, with regard to, you know, the going on the trips and the photos, the videos, and everything else involved. And that's, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I personally feel like that is more work than I could ever handle. It's just beyond me in a way. I mean, what do you think about that?
No, I'd have to agree. I mean, that is an insane amount of work for one individual. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would love to get to that point or even to like half that point. Just the thought of selling thousands of one product from you that many people want something of yours that has your work in it is alluring, but there's no way I'd do it by myself.
Yeah.
Obviously the signing and the printing to ensure quality control and all that, but everything would be in-house. But I would definitely have, whether it's like my girlfriend or literally hire on a friend or someone for that month where you're super busy with that specific like calendar, for instance. We'll keep with that.
Yeah.
And just have them be like, okay, this is what you're getting, this is what you get paid, and this is what you're going to do. And you're just going to be in charge of helping me to pack and whatever I need. Because, to do that by yourself, I'd go insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think, though, that I would imagine there's got to be a light at the end of the tunnel where when that's done, there's got to be a trip to look forward to. There's got to be something that is shiny, that is dangling right after that. Because I know that's the way that's what I need in order to get through that. Like when I put together the print portfolios and the box sets, there's usually, you know, a trip on the other side of it or something along those lines that is there to help out a little bit.
Yeah, and you definitely can't say that like, oh, the money is going to be motivational, because at that point, when it's a pre-order, you already have that money.
Yes.
Everything's already in, everything's already done. So
yeah, you just have this mountain of work ahead of you.
Yeah, there's got to be some kind of, okay, once I get all this done, I can relax and go off and have a nice vacation or something where I don't have to think about anything.
And speaking of vacations and not thinking about anything, this coming weekend, I am probably going to go on a little mini trip to an area that is roughly the same general distances driving to Death Valley, but the Eastern Sierra here in California, there's some good fall color and stuff there. And it's an area that I've seen some beautiful work from. I know that there's some wonderful elements, and it's much different than I've had to work with before. But also it's an area I'm completely unfamiliar with. So I was thinking about heading up there and doing something a little different, which is not taking a camera at all. Just to get a feeling for the lay of the land, just to be inspired by the elements of what I see, and also to experience the different types of light that is there, because it'll be different from what I'm used to. And so I think by going there, I might take the video kit so I have something to play with, whether it's just recording some little relaxing video clips or something along those lines, but something to allow me to engage in, start taking things in. But this will be the first time that I've gone somewhere without a camera, with no intention whatsoever of taking any photos. And so I think that might be a interesting little experiment to see how that goes. And also it gives, since both my wife and I are both introverts, that would give her a weekend where she can just, hang out with the cats and the dog and relax and just, so it's kind of a win-win for everyone. So I think that could be interesting. Have you ever had any thoughts of going on a trip somewhere like that? I mean, not specifically like that, but a trip somewhere that could be perhaps during a very ideal time of the year with ideal conditions, but just leaving the camera behind?
No. No, not really.
I think it'll be liberating.
I could see that it would be. Yeah. My problem would be that I would just get bored. So I'm not one of those people that can go to the beach and sit for hours just drinking and watching the waves or whatever on the beach.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither.
I need to be kept busy, at least to some degree. And photography constantly gives me that. But yeah, that's not something I think I could do. I would love to try it.
Well, for me, I'm also not one to sit still. I mean, I need to be busy, but for me, it's going to be driving somewhere, pulling off, scouting an area, going somewhere else. I'm going to be on my feet from, sunrise to sunset, looking at things, scoping things out, coming up with plans, coming up with potential themes to photograph on future visits.
I think that's the other difference, though, too, is your work isn't as reactionary as mine is. Yours is much more planned out, and we've talked about this before, but for me to go to a place, I'm going to go, and if I see something, I'll set up then and there, photograph it, and move on. So it would require a major change in my workflow for me to do that and to try and plan ahead.
It'll be interesting when we record next. I'll certainly have some experiences to share, but it'll be interesting checking it out, and it's also bear country, so there's that. But
you'll be fine.
Hopefully, the bears can't eat my camera because my camera won't be there. So there's that.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah. And another update since our last recording. So I mentioned a book last time called Breath by James Nestor, and I finished that book, and I highly recommend that book. It's an absolutely fascinating peek at basically how the body works and how various cultures through the thousands of years have basically picked up on certain things and learned to sort of fine-tune the way the body works on things. And so I've been putting a lot of the techniques I learned in that book into practice. And last time I had mentioned how when I'd go skating, I was only breathing through my nose. And at first it was a little bit weird and you feel like you're drowning. But now my performance skating while breathing through my nose is better than before, which is kind of fascinating. And we have these conditions we get each kind of fall through kind of the winter months here in San Diego, called the Santa Ana winds, which is when the winds reverse. They come from the east instead of from the west, and it's very dry. And along with that, there's oftentimes this feeling, like this very positive feeling that comes with them, which from what I understand is from like negative ions that are in the air that just the body reacts to and makes you feel better. But it sometimes gives this feeling of like your nose opening up and just, sinuses wide open and such. I guess unless a person has allergies or something, but I have that feeling like all the time now, which is really a fascinating peak in terms of how profound of an impact it has on the way that you breathe. And I'm also working on increasing my own tolerance to CO2, which then allows you to do even better when it comes to like sports and stuff like that in performance. So if anyone listened to our conversation last week and you heard about that book, give it a try. It is really, really a fascinating look. And it has changed things. So that's been kind of fascinating. There was another topic that I wanted to discuss that I was hoping to talk about last week, but we had such a long discussion last week, we didn't quite get it in. But it's the perception of color, and this is something that I know that we've spoken in the past on the podcast about black and white and color, and I've had some observations, and some of which I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. But it all started about this time last year. My wife and I were going through a walk through the neighborhood, and there was a neighbor who had these lights that were hanging on their house, just kind of like Christmas lights, but they were just all purple. And seeing that, it triggered something in my mind. I couldn't figure out what it was. It was like this like reminiscent feeling. And I'm like, what is this? It's reminding me of something, but I don't know what it is. I was just trying to figure out what it was. And then I've noticed some other things since then, where there are some other things too that I saw, some colorful things. And it also gave me this really strong reminiscent feeling. And it's been bugging me trying to figure out what it was. And I finally realized that it corresponds to so many different things from my childhood, because we're surrounded by color oftentimes when we're young. And I don't know about you, but now it seems like things are far more monochrome. But it was triggering something which was, it's hard to describe, just kind of like this reminiscent sort of feeling. And it got me thinking a little bit about perhaps that's one of the reasons why I pursue color photography, because it taps into something that I don't quite know what it is, but it has something to do with the way that your brain interprets color. And even so much as I recently bought some smart wool socks, and they came up with these like elastic bands on with all these colors. I'm like, I can't get enough of these colors. I got to put them on my wrist and wear them like a bracelet all day long. And so it's just been fascinating. So I was thinking, with you photographing mostly in black and white, where color isn't even really an issue, it has me wondering about the differences in experiences, and whether, if for some reason, if the color has as profound of an effect on you. It just has me thinking about that.
I can't say that it does. I think scent is much more of a factor when it comes to like helping me to reminisce. If I smell something that, like cookies that smelled like my grandmother had baked before, or something like those stereotypical kind of examples. But color, I don't cognitively react to that strongly. And I do wonder if that had become a shift from when I started photographing in black and white, or if it was always like that. But I do wonder what causes that, like psychologically.
Yeah. Because there's something going on, and I don't know, I'm sure it's like some some chemical that's being, released in the brain, or some triggering some pathways or something along those lines. But it truly is fascinating, and it's having me want to tap more into that. And I think it also relates a little bit to some of the things I've learned by reading that book about breathing, and then also having like this, like, a much sort of clearer, I don't know, sinuses or whatever, but like it feels like it's more of a profound thing. 'Cause I've been chasing that lately. And many episodes back, I talked about how I was even like thinking back to things from childhood, things that kind of brought me joy back then. And you grow up and things are a little bit different and such. But I had mentioned how I was even going on, because I was big on Legos as a kid. I was thinking about, like, just getting another Lego set, just kind of like jumping back into that again. And so I did it. There is this Lego set, the DeLorean from Back to the Future.
Okay.
I'm like, I gotta have that. So I spent the past 3 days over the weekend playing with Legos, putting them together, putting it on my shelf.
Hey,
and I gotta say, I enjoy this shift of perception. I'm just trying to kind of ride that wave, and so it's been fun, kind of exploring stuff and trying to make connections between things. And things along those lines.
Yeah, I've got a big box of Legos that sits in the basement that it's all just various sets from when I was younger and played with them a lot. And anytime that I find myself over at Barnes & Noble, I always peruse through the aisle. There's actually I don't remember exactly what it is. Let me see if I have that photo on my phone still. Yeah, here it is. So there's one set that I really want to get, but I just need to pull the trigger on it. It's the Dagobah Jedi training set from Star Wars.
I'm not familiar with that one.
So it's like Yoda's little hut, along with it has Luke and R2-D2 and half the little ship. It's kind of just more of like a display one.
Yeah.
Kind of like how the cars would be, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
Because it has on the side of it, on the facing side, it has the Lego Star Wars branding, and then it has the "Do or do not, there is no try" quote from Yoda. And I just
that's cool.
I just think it's such a cool looking little set that normally I'm not like super into Star Wars. I'm more so than I ever was, but still. Still, it's just one of those things of like, I could see that like sitting on a shelf somewhere in my room, because why not?
And I think it's tapping into that same sort of thing. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm surrounded so much by photography, and it just represents a shift in one's perception, a shift back to kind of the way things were, and also as a side note, I had mentioned this in an Instagram story, but when I bought my first camera, my first big boy camera, I don't know how you'd say it. It was a Canon 1D at the time. So it was one of the first professional Canon cameras. I bought that after having sold a bunch of my childhood Lego sets on eBay, because I found that they were worth a fair amount of money. And so there's one summer where I basically dug out that big box, found the instruction manuals, put them together, then broke them down and had them as sets, and then sold them on eBay. And so it's, I don't know, it's kind of going full circle, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I was over with my cousin after we recorded last week, and he is big into like painting minifigures and that kind of thing, and does a lot of like resin printing and all of that. He actually, I found the file for it, and he printed it for me of the Corinthian skull from Sandman.
Oh, cool.
So I just have to paint that. But he and I were playing this game, Marvel United, it's a card game, and you have these little Marvel character minifigures that some he had painted, some he's working on. And I found myself picking up the starter set for it just because there's kind of like what you were saying, there's so much revolving around photography for my life. Like literally everything that I do is centered either around photography or my writing. And I have a pull to get away from that a little bit.
Yeah.
Just because it becomes a lot. I mean, when your whole life is focused on like one thing, it's kind of like it gets old sometimes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely, I can definitely understand that. And I think it's important to have that balance, whatever that may be. And especially things that are like even the process of putting together that DeLorean Lego set where it's, it took 3 days to do that. So it's a fairly mundane thing, just going through, and it kind of quiets the brain down, and you're just working on a different task at hand. And so I can see how, whether it's painting things or stuff along those lines, would be just a change in the process.
I mean, that's like on the Discord I was talking about how badly I want to revamp my website and get away from Squarespace and get into a very simplified, custom built, if it has to be, kind of site. But the reality is I either need to learn how to code or I need to pay someone what could be thousands of dollars to build this site how I want it to be. And then take that chance that it's still not exactly what I want. And I'm like, I have books from years ago when I initially wanted to start learning how to code. And in hindsight, I probably should have broke those out during COVID when I had all of that time and no responsibilities. But I didn't. And so now I'm like, do I take this time that I really don't have and learn to code, or because now it's another thing on my plate that I could all of a sudden find real enjoyment in, and that could be like an escape from photography the rest of the stuff, or it could just be seen as yet another photographical subgenre that I just put into the mix.
Now, if only you had a time machine, like a small one, perhaps perched on a bookshelf, to go back in time to the start of the pandemic, then I use all that time. Well, that's another thing too. Like, when the pandemic first started and there was all these projects people had in mind, like, oh, if only I had like a month or whatever to do only what I wanted to. There's so many things I could do. And then to find out that most people just, they didn't use the time for that. It seems like time is the factor that is the most, I don't know.
I wrote about that in my blog. That's just the whole idea that like I had all this stuff that I wanted to get done. Like even like this summer, I was like, okay, we're going to work on a bunch of ebooks that I have planned. We're going to write a bunch of articles and get in a whole lot of new publications. And we're going to do at least get started with a photography presentation for camera clubs and stuff, and maybe do a couple of those. And like none of it happened. I'm like, what? Like what went wrong? Time is funny like that.
It's a tough one because you have to have ways of I don't know, staying on task and dedicating the time to stuff, and then even as you do that, it seems like time is still that thing that is elusive that you still keep chasing. So yeah, it is a tricky thing. Though I will say that at the time of recording this, it's been about a week or so since I launched the ebook that I've been working on for about a year and a half. Speaking of time, and I will say we're talking in the past about working as like projects and things along those lines. And I gotta say, when I finished that ebook, when everything was done, I uploaded it to my website, it gave a enormous sense of satisfaction from simply completing the project. And it had me thinking about how with so many of the things I do, there isn't necessarily a end to the project. It's just something like going to the various locations and taking photos. It's something that just, builds year after year, but there's not like a defined end date of it. And so when I worked on the ebook, when everything was done, it was very, very nice to have that. And I received an email from Simon Gulliver, and he was mentioning something I talked about in my ebook, where I said that it's generally the fourth day of my trips. My trips are usually 7 to 10 days in length, but it's usually the fourth day of my trip where I become more open to my surroundings and become more aware of my surroundings. And that's usually when some of my best work is done. And it's something that we've talked about here on the podcast. And he posed a question that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. He said, how best can we I'm going to try this again. How best can we utilize limited time in the field? So not a lot of people necessarily have the opportunity to, go off into the field for 5, 6, 7 days to get to that point beyond which they become more open to their surroundings. And I know that some of the work you do isn't necessarily longer duration trips. I know you shoot some stuff closer to home. Did you have any thoughts on perhaps better ways of being more in touch with the subjects you're shooting, but without necessarily having to spend several days?
I think repetition of the place that you go to is a key factor there, or at least to the general vicinity. So like a lot of the places that I go to, I may not be revisiting all the time consistently, but they're all so similar, at least in terms of what trees grow there and what kind of what I'm going to see as a general idea, at least, because of them all being in this like eastern area of Pennsylvania. And so I think that repetition really helps to learn that area as well as you can. And it's not something that is going to happen overnight. It's something that's going to take a considerable amount of time for you to get to. But on all of my short trips anymore, the biggest thing that I prioritize is just my enjoyment in the field and my enjoyment of nature and soaking in that solitude, rather than trying to go out and rush around for photographs. I mean, I understand, like, as landscape photographers especially, we all want to go out and get the next best shot that we can and to have thousands of likes on social media and be the next Mark Adamus and all of that. But there's something to be said about the prioritization of nature over photography. And I think if you can find yourself into that sort of niche mindset, you're going to be better off, especially on those shorter trips.
Are there any techniques that you use in order to, because you had mentioned that, you prioritize the experience and everything along those lines. Is there any techniques you do in terms of trying to help with that at all?
Keep the camera in the bag.
Keep the bag by a bear.
Yes. Keep the camera in a bag. Keep the bag by some kind of big predator that you don't want to harm or get harmed by, and your life is going to be solved. That's it.
Yes.
That's the answer to life.
Yeah.
No, I can't really say that there's any serious like technique or anything. I mean, because it could be such a major shift in your mindset. And to get to that point, you have to have the intrinsic motivation to get there. Because there's no true reward as is popularly seen. Like, there's no gold bucket at the end of a rainbow kind of thing when you do start prioritizing nature over photography. But that's not to say there isn't any benefit to it, because benefits are massive. They're just within you more so than they are if you were taking a photograph and you have a photograph to show someone or something like that. So yeah, I can't really say, not right off the top of my head, that there are any true like techniques or anything that I use.
So like I find that I can't really even, I have a hard time getting in that mindset unless I have that amount of time and I'm like forced to stay at a location over that. And so I really haven't developed the whatever it is that allows one to achieve that level of awareness of your surroundings at a quicker time. So I really haven't like developed that muscle. And I think partially it's because of working with a large format and drawing inspiration from areas that are a little further from home and all that sort of stuff. But what I'm thinking about doing when I go on the trip this weekend is I'm thinking about trying to engage different parts of the brain and trying to engage the senses more, which is what I've talked about. But even something as simple as just sitting down for a while and just like sketching what I see in front of me and try to see if that perhaps has some sort of impact on the way I perceive things, on my mindset, and all of this with no expectations whatsoever of taking any photos. But I plan on just experimenting with some stuff along those lines. But it's, I don't know. I mean, it's got to be a very much a challenge to be just dropped into a new area and then just to be expected to shoot photos, because it just doesn't really. Some people can do that, but I know that that's not one of my strong suits for at all.
The other benefit that, and it's long-term benefit, but I've found that when you start to prioritize nature and your time spent in it, and you aren't thinking so much about the potential photographs or anything to do with photography, you start to see in a, I guess you could call it maybe a more matured way. And you'll find that you are taking photographs for totally different reasons. You're seeing in such a different way that when you do find something and take a photograph, it is more so because it called out to you in a whisper rather than a shout.
And those are the images that have more lasting appeal. There's another, so from the Discord that we have set up, there's a topic suggestions section, and I have one here which is interesting. It's from Roger Hyam. I think that's how you pronounce it. Hyam. Hyam. So he says the topic is sky, and so he says, a quick look at Cody and Ben's portfolios shows a remarkable lack of shots that are about the sky or have the sky as the main element. Even in Ben's Death Valley images, the sky tends to play second fiddle. Ben might disagree. I don't. It definitely is not about the sky. In the past, cloudscapes played a major role in photographers' portfolios. What do you think? So I posed the question to you, Cody. What are your thoughts on sky and why perhaps you don't include it as much as seen elsewhere? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
For me, it depends on what I'm photographing. So when I'm in the woodlands, I take a lot of inspiration from Simon Baxter, as we've spoken of before. And one of his big principles that one of the big things that I've learned from him was to limit the amount of sky in your image, because it aids in the intimacy of it. And there's other factors to it as well that he had discussed that I can't recall at the moment, but
and that makes sense.
That's kind of just like why I avoid the sky in those images. But there are also times where if I photograph like the fields, when I was working on a series of farm photographs, I was taking a lot of inspiration from Clyde Butcher, in the sense that I wanted these big skies that are real dark and puffy white cloud kind of images, because that was what the image was about. And I think that's what it all comes down to, is I don't want to take a woodland photograph and have it all of a sudden be about the cloud in the background rather than about the trees itself.
Yeah.
But I also don't find myself in a situation where the sky is as readily available for me to photograph. And there are a lot of times where I'll go out midday and the sky has absolute nothing to it. It's just a plain blue sky and there's no visual interest. So I purposely avoid putting it in. And I think that's more than likely one of the bigger contributing factors to why I avoid the sky. That all said, with the RB67, I've been playing around with some cloud photographs that, whether they come to any kind of project or whatever happens with them, if anything at all, it's been interesting to play with. But how about you?
When it comes to including the sky in a photo, for me, that is like an anxiety inducing experience for the most part. Even if the resulting photo looks nice and calm and portrays a vast scale like it can in Death Valley, I think it's just because since my photos are oftentimes planned hours in advance, I don't even know what the sky will look like. So I think it's part of the whole process of contemplative photography where, you know, you find a subject, you find when the light's going to be good, and you just wait for the light to be great on that subject. And I might be setting up my camera at, 2:00 in the afternoon for a sunset photo or something along those lines. So oftentimes I don't really factor the sky in too much unless it just presents itself as it's here right now. It's very shootable right now. Get out the camera and shoot it. In that case, I might include a little bit more of the sky, but even then, clouds move fast. By the time I get the camera set up, the clouds will be different than I saw them. And then you factor in like grad filters and all the other technical stuff that goes into it. So that's one of the primary reasons, I think, because I pursue more of the contemplative style where I'm setting up advance. It feels safer to not have the sky in there. And it's less things to juggle, I think, is when it comes down to. I'd much rather photograph a tree up against a really cool looking sandstone or something where it's one less variable to factor in. And I think it just helps to simplify the process a bit. So I think that's the main reason. I think that's something that if a person is working primarily with digital or a camera where they can shoot really quickly, yeah, it's no big deal to pull out the camera real quick and to, photograph what you see. But just by working with large format, it does change things quite a bit, just from a technical standpoint. So I'd say that's the main reason. But even regardless of that, I'm more drawn to those smaller scenes anyways, I think, because they're just more interesting to observe. And I think I guess it all comes down to just the bigger scenes they're tougher to shoot. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, just more drawn to the intimate scenes of nature rather than the big scenes, which are more likely going to have the sky in them. It's definitely where I stand.
The dynamic scenes with the fast changing lights, and then it doesn't take much to just make things far more chaotic than it needs to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. And you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, Discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.